Okay, we are going live in 3, 2, 1. Hello out there, YouTube. Welcome back to my podcast. This is James McDuffie. Today we got an interesting show for you. I want to talk a little bit about intermittent fasting. As you can see, I got a guest, our first one. I can proudly say that we finally have some better equipment that allows us to do some actual interviews. So my friend Nick has decided to sit in and help me play with the equipment so that we can both become a little bit more proficient with it. So he's an account manager and a territory sales rep. He's also my business partner in one of our upcoming businesses called Epigee. And you'll hear more about that in the future, I'm sure. But he's also a non-fitness person, so he's going to kind of just give his 2 cents. So Nick Oliveira is with us today.
Right. Thanks so much for having me, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, we're going to be doing a little bit of a podcast update and talking about the main topic, which is intermittent fasting, which I know a lot of people that I talk to is really, really interested in it. And that'll kind of feed into the next podcast that we're going to do after this. So sit tight. Let's go. All right, we are back and live. So one of the things I really want to just kind of start off with is we have a lot of new equipment here, don't we?
Yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah, so we don't have professional headphones yet. These are kind of just like my gaming headphones for my kids and I. But I got 2 new microphones. The stands are on their way in the mail, hopefully this week. Maybe we'll get them Tuesday. But I also have a Rodecaster Pro, which is a nice soundboard that mixes all our sound for us, and it looks pretty spiffy.
Right, brings a lot to the bass of your voice.
Yeah,
well, I think sounds a lot better than on the phone.
I think that's more of the microphones, but it's definitely nice. When I was plugging these microphones into my computer, I wasn't getting any volume at all because you need a sound booster for power. But plugged directly into this thing, it definitely seems to amp all the sound for you, so you get a nice clear vocal.
Yeah, I wish I could sound like this all the time.
I think you do. It's just there's always the external noise that influences it, right?
Sure.
But I agree with you. I kind of definitely sound like the sound of my voice better through these than standard microphones.
Absolutely.
So in addition, I have a list of the people that I want to start interviewing. So hopefully in the next couple of months, I'll work towards that. Now that we actually have the equipment and the ability to kind of splice everything together, it should be really nice going forward to actually get those interviews.
Sure.
The one last thing that I need to do is I didn't realize that these are dynamic mics, which block out the rest of the sound in the house other than us speaking.
Right.
But I also need one more mic or 2 that are also dynamic mics, because the third mic I thought would work. Just picks up everything in the room,
right,
which isn't really what I want. Anyways, so that's that. Another nice thing is we have apparently 42 listeners to the podcast now.
All right, moving on up.
Yeah, I mean, we've only been going for, 3 weeks now?
Yeah.
And so 40 listeners is not too shabby.
Right.
I don't think so. And out of those 42 listeners, we have had over 90 downloads of the podcast overall.
Awesome.
And all the videos on YouTube as of right now, we have about 50 views.
Okay.
So not super crazy, but still it's a start for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this will be episode 5, which I like.
Yeah. Moving right along.
Yeah, we are. We've covered a couple of my favorite topics, at least as of recent history. Yeah. But you know that I've been into intermittent fasting for quite a while now.
Yeah, a long time. We've been talking about it for quite a while.
Yeah, at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, maybe even more than a couple of years now.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Like 5, 6. But so that's what we're really going to dive into and cover today. So if you have any questions at all, this is, you're my voice of reason from the audience's perspective, so
Sure.
they can ask the questions that they want.
Yeah, the everyman.
Yeah, I like that. The everyman.
Right.
All right. So let's kind of get into it just a little bit. Yeah. So intermittent fasting is the idea of not eating, and it's really that simple, right? We've all heard of breakfast. You eat it in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Turns out, guess where its name came from?
Fasting.
Yeah, exactly. Break fast. Like you're actually breaking your fast. Now, the interesting thing is that doctors have always said that the first meal you eat in the day is the most important.
Sure.
The question is does it have to happen right when you wake up?
Not
Maybe.
necessarily, yeah.
Well,
Yes.
it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of the historical nutritional expertise over the last several decades, dude, make yourself feel comfortable. Just don't even worry about it, right? A lot of the nutritional expertise has kind of shifted,
Sure.
right? You go look at the 80s and 90s, and everyone was saying eat all the time,
Right.
right? But obesity has kind of gone skyrocket.
Yeah.
Originally it was low-fat diets, which obviously didn't work.
Right.
And now we're taking kind of another look at carbohydrates and how that actually affects the body.
Sure.
And so there's this guy named Dr. Jason Fung, and he wrote a couple books. The first book he wrote is called The Obesity Code, and the second book he wrote is The Diabetes Code. Now he's not the only one in the industry that's talking about intermittent fasting, but he's definitely bringing fasting back as kind of a predominant goal towards health.
Okay.
And so the way he kind of describes this whole problem with weight in America, as we see, is picture this. So let's say that you got a refrigerator full of food.
Okay.
Right. So that's you eating every single day.
Right.
And then let's say that you have a freezer, and that freezer is also full of food.
Okay.
Are you going to pull food from the freezer, or are you going to pull food from your refrigerator first?
From the refrigerator. It's going to go bad.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's going to go bad. It's not going to last. You got to eat it first. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's he calls this the multi-compartmental problem in energy balance for the body.
Right.
And so what this means is that you're not going to lose fat unless you got nothing in the refrigerator.
Okay.
And so your body stores glycogen, which is energy from the food that we eat, in the liver and in the muscles. And so until your body runs through all that glycogen store, you won't actually lose weight.
Okay.
At all. Well, there's a couple ways of doing this. So there's like the typical stuff of caloric deficit diet, which most people hate, right?
Yeah.
People think that you can kind of do it a little bit with ketogenesis. You've probably heard of like the keto diet.
Oh yeah, it's all the rage right now.
Yeah. So what's the keto diet? Just for those that don't know what it is, you could.
From my understanding, it is pretty much cutting sugar out almost completely, eating a lot of food. From a lot of people I know that do the keto diet, it's a lot of bacon and super delicious meats.
I guess that's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Predominantly, just for clarification, the ketogenic diet is high protein, high fat, right? Because the body doesn't really use protein very well for energy.
Right.
And so it actually spends extra energy to pull protein into an energy source. But fat is predominantly how your body uses energy if it doesn't have carbohydrates. And so it's this process called ketogenesis.
Right.
And so the liver pulls energy out of your fat stores. Now, the benefit of the ketogenic diet predominantly is that what it does is it teaches your body to use fat as energy. And so if your body's using fat as energy and then you don't eat, your body's going to immediately just stay in ketogenesis and start pulling fat from your fat stores.
Right.
And because you have a low carbohydrate diet, you're not actually storing the actual glycogen in your muscles and in your liver. So there's a lot less free energy available, and the body can just pull that from fat stores.
Okay. So when people are doing this ketogenic diet, I've noticed just from some of my coworkers and stuff who've done the diet itself, it seems like they'll kind of lose that weight, but it always kind of comes back within a month or two.
Yeah, so this goes back to the other podcast I did a couple of weeks ago on forming good habits.
Yeah.
Right? Is people pick diets they don't like.
Right.
People like bread. They like carbohydrates. They like their sugar.
Right.
And so on any diet, and this even goes for the intermittent fasting version of the diet, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is you stop doing it after a while. So you get good results at first, and those good results aren't necessarily related to the diet even.
Okay.
You don't like what you're eating less of it because you don't like what you're eating.
Right.
Because you're eating less of it, you're in a caloric deficit.
Wow, imagine that.
Yeah, and what really makes most people lose a lot of the extra weight is that caloric deficit.
Okay.
Now, there are benefits to being in a ketogenic state, right? Ketones, as they're called.
Right.
And there's like clarity of mind. People say that they have they don't feel tired in the afternoon, and in the morning when they wake up, if they're on a ketogenic diet, they have a lot more clarity. Like it doesn't feel like that food fog over breakfast and lunch all the time.
Sure.
So there are benefits, but in general, there's a lot of research out there and a lot of studies. I was listening to Jeff Nippard and a couple people that had done what's called a meta study. Right. And so a meta study is a study of studies.
Sure.
And so they looked at these studies, and what they really found is that people were just eating in caloric deficits, no matter what diet they were in.
Okay.
Right. And so it doesn't really help people to be in these caloric deficits on diets where they hate it. Right. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're eating a diet that you love.
Okay.
And you just decide that you're going to, I eat 2 eggs, two pieces of turkey bacon, and 2 pieces of sourdough toast every day. That's pretty much what I eat for breakfast, if I eat breakfast.
Right.
If I decided to cut out the 2 pieces of toast, it's 120 calories per piece of toast.
Okay.
That's 240 calories, which doesn't sound like a lot.
Right.
But you could lose a pound of fat a week by cutting out 240 calories a day.
Oh, wow.
Right? It's not as drastic as most people make it out to be. And the nice thing about doing that is, dude, I enjoy everything else that I eat, and it doesn't change the rest of my diet.
Right.
Whereas most people, they pick these crazy diets like keto or whatever else, and they're not immediate fans. They were eating the way they were originally because they like that food, right?
Right.
And the majority of people that stick with it end up liking that type of a diet, but the people that fall off really quick, like you see a big drop in weight and then it bounces right back, is because they just never were into that type of eating to begin with.
Right.
I mean, who likes to go to In-N-Out and not get a bun, man? Like, really?
Yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's nuts. So that's kind of a little bit of ketogenesis there, right? How the body pulls fat using the liver from your fat cells.
Right.
But it also pulls it from the fat in your bloodstream.
Okay.
So if you're eating a high fat diet, it goes to the liver, and the liver just takes that and turns it back into ketones, and that's energy source. Might as well be glucose.
Okay.
Right. So your brain can use it, your bones can use it, your all your organs can use it. It's just like energy.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is, let's get back to kind of the whole intermittent fasting thing.
Right.
Right. So intermittent fasting kind of does the same thing, except it does it by not introducing extra fat into your system, and doesn't do it by not eating carbs.
Okay.
What it doesn't say is, it just says you're not eating anything. And so because you're not eating everything, or not eating anything at all, your carbohydrate stores get depleted naturally. And then your body has nothing. And because it has nothing, then it goes to your local fat stores and pulls food, or pulls energy.
Okay.
Now, they both form ketogenesis. They both form ketones. They both give energy the same source. The difference is, one is you're controlling through what you eat, and the other one is just by not eating.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So as far as fasting goes, how do you know, how do you, I guess, get to the point where it's unhealthy versus being healthy for you?
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit. Okay. So let's talk about a short-term fast, moderate fast, and long-term fast.
Okay.
Kind of break it down there for the type of fasting that people typically do.
Okay.
So every person on the planet fasts for at least 8 to 10 hours every single day.
Sleeping.
That's right. So you go to bed and you're sleeping for 8 hours, or you eat dinner at 8 or 9. You don't eat before you go to bed at 10.
Right.
You wake up at 7 or 8, and then, you're all of a sudden you're 10, sometimes even 12 hours before you eat breakfast. So most people fast for every single day.
Sure.
Right. Short-term fast, you get some health benefits, obviously, right? Your body's pulling energy while you're asleep, and it's restoring a lot of your other bodily functions. But those are really short-term fasts.
Okay.
A lot of people in the bodybuilding and fitness communities have been starting to do something that they call a warrior fast, also known as a 16-hour fast.
Okay.
And so it's essentially just extending your fast past breakfast into lunch.
Okay.
So if you eat at noon,
right,
and then you eat dinner at 7 o'clock, that's 7 hours, right? So if you take 24 minus 7, you're at...
What, 17?
Yeah, 17.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a little bit of an hour of a leeway in that area, but you eat you eat lunch and dinner, skip breakfast, and all of a sudden you're fasting for 16 hours a day.
Right.
That's the warrior diet.
Okay.
Now, the interesting thing about this is people don't change their caloric restrictions or their caloric intake. So if you were eating 2,200 calories before you go on this 16-hour warrior fast, you're still eating 2,200 calories when you eat.
Okay.
You're just eating a little bit more at lunch and a little bit more at dinner.
Okay.
Now, overall, you're not eating as much, which typically means your stomach's probably shrinking a little bit.
Sure.
Because you have more time. And so a lot of the times these people don't eat as much in general as they would if they were, well, let me rephrase that. They eat a little bit more than what they would have eaten for a typical lunch or dinner,
Okay.
but not excessively enough to meet the total calorie constraints for the day.
Okay.
And so just like the other diets, they're in a caloric deficit
Right.
because they're missing breakfast and they're not eating as much for lunch or dinner to make up the calories.
Right.
Right. Now, there's a whole lot of other benefits that you can get out of it. And we'll get into that a little bit later, autophagy, neuroplasticity. We'll get into that in a little bit later.
Sure.
But the predominant things that I want to emphasize here is that most people that try to keep their diet the same, so they eat the same breakfast, the same lunch, and the same dinner.
Right.
Most people will fast 2 to 3 days a week, and they'll just skip breakfast.
Okay.
So if you're eating the same the entire rest of the week and you're just missing 3 meals,
Right.
that's enough to lose weight.
Okay.
So it acts like a diet
Right.
because you're eating the same and you're in a slight caloric deficit,
Right.
right?
And so, as someone who's never really fasted but wants to try, how do you kind of get over that hump of being hangry, I guess you could say?
Yeah, hangry.
How do you start?
Well, so let's talk about how the body kind of tells you that you're hungry first. That might be important. So the body has this hormone. It's called ghrelin. Okay, ghrelin is here's the crazy thing. Ghrelin's a trainable hormone.
Okay.
You train it.
Right.
So let's say that every day you eat at 8, then you eat at noon, and you eat at 6 p.m.
Okay.
You are training your body to spike ghrelin at 8, noon, and 6.
Okay.
And so if you don't eat breakfast, then what your body does is it spikes ghrelin because it's on this timer that it's set, and you feel really, really hungry in the morning at 8 o'clock, whether you eat or not.
Right.
Now, the amazing thing is if you skip breakfast for a week, you're retraining your body off of ghrelin.
Okay.
And so all of a sudden, if you skip breakfast for a week, your body no longer spikes ghrelin at breakfast. It only spikes it at noon and at 8 o'clock.
Okay. So it only typically takes a week to be able to train this ghrelin?
It kind of depends on what your eating habits are, right? So
Okay.
typically it takes 2 to 3 days for your body to adjust a time schedule for ghrelin.
Okay.
So a good example is, let's say I go on a long fast. Let's say I fast for 5 days.
Okay.
I'll be starving for the first 2.
Right.
By the time I get to the 3rd day, you're not even hungry anymore.
Okay.
Okay. So you've trained ghrelin really quickly because you haven't done anything.
Right.
Now, if I'm moderate fasting, like warrior fasting every other day or 3 days a week, then it may take you a couple weeks for your body to just get used to the fact that it doesn't need to spike ghrelin every day at breakfast.
Okay.
Now, it works even better if you just say, hey, I'm not going to eat breakfast for like a week. So every single day, probably by the 3rd or 4th day, you won't feel as hungry for breakfast.
Okay.
It's just at all.
Right.
Now, there's a problem with changing your diet. Specifically, is your body's not used to eating itself or eating ketones for energy.
Right.
And so a lot of the reason people have sugar crashes, you know, those people that are like, oh, I have to eat sugar, and they my blood sugar is dropping.
Yeah, I got to pound a Monster.
Yeah, or something, right?
Yeah.
The main reason they have to do that is because their body is so used to consuming sugar that it can't process ketones.
Okay.
And so even though your body's processing ketones, right, because you have no sugar in your bloodstream, no glycogen,
Right.
they're not used to it. And so because they're not used to it, their brain isn't used to running off of ketones,
Okay.
and you get really hangry.
Sure.
Like really, like you're not used to feeling this way. You feel like crap.
Right.
So when I first got into it, my wife was really, Kim was really annoyed for probably the first couple of months.
Okay.
Because it took me a couple of months to finally get used to being in ketosis.
Right.
And so, I was angry at work. I was angry at home. I was yelling at my kids. I was, a little bit more argumentative at work.
Right.
And I told people, like, dude, I'm not eating right now. You gotta have to forgive me. It got pretty bad, but after about 2 months or so, it kind of leveled out.
Okay.
And now that I've been doing it for years, I don't get hangry anymore, like at all.
Right.
Right. Because I'm so used to being in ketosis that when my body switches over, I'm already there.
Okay.
Right.
So is there any point that you can get to where your body is too far gone to be able to process these ketones, or is it never too late to start?
No, I mean, it is never too late to start to try to do intermittent fasting for your body to use ketones. It's just another energy system that's available in the body.
Okay.
Right. It's not like, you're obese and therefore you don't have this system available. It's
Right.
available to everybody.
Okay.
Okay. In fact, there's there's an example of the longest fast in history that we'll get to a little bit later. That's kind of crazy.
Okay.
But let's talk a little bit more about the duration of fasting first.
Sure.
Okay. So we talked a little bit about short-term fasting. Everybody does it.
Yeah.
Moderate fasting is this kind of warrior fasting, and not everybody does it every day. Most people do, like I said, 2 to 3, sometimes 4 days a week where they skip breakfast.
Okay.
Some people are brave enough to skip dinner. I'm not. I like dinner.
Right.
It's like one of my favorite meals. I can skip eggs one day and, definitely get a good salmon dinner at home or one of the pasta dishes that we make that I love.
Right.
But I almost skip dinner, man.
Yeah.
But some people do. So some people, they can kind of pick whether they want to skip breakfast or skip dinner. But the whole goal is to really get your eating cycle into a 6 to 8 hour window.
Right.
Rather than eating over the course of the day.
Okay.
So longer term fasting is kind of impressive. So there's people that have historically, if you go look at like the Bible or monks that live in the Nepal, right? These guys have historically done fast for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And it sounds crazy, but honestly, if you have enough fat on your system, then your body doesn't need anything other than some basic electrolytes and water.
Okay.
So believe it or not, one of the biggest concerns typically is people are like, oh, you're going to waste away. You're going to lose all that protein, right?
Yeah, the conception.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's protein is a vital nutrient,
right?
And the human body doesn't make like a certain set of amino acids, right? And so you have to eat food. You have to eat real food. Some proteins that are some of these amino acids are made in vegetables. Some are made in meat. But you have to have access to these essential amino acids. Otherwise, you can be really unhealthy.
Right.
And, people are concerned if I'm not eating protein, then how am I staying healthy?
Yeah.
Right. Turns out that Dr. Jason Fung has actually done all the research on this. And so what they do is they take these people and they take their they take their urine and they do a urine analysis.
Okay.
Urine analysis. And they detect what levels of different things the body's getting rid of, excrement.
Sure.
Right? And so if you're under 24 hours of fasting, your body has a high level of getting rid of protein.
Okay.
Because it's just getting rid of protein, right? It's just, it has too much, it uses what it needs, it throws the rest. Just like a lot of other things in the system, if you have too much of it, your body tries to get rid of excess.
Sure.
Even though it absorbs a lot of it anyways into fat. But what they found out is that, let's say that your body starts, you're eating a normal diet,
right,
and you decide to start fasting. So your body's predominantly running off of carbohydrates, okay? Near the end of a 16 to 18 hours, your body starts spiking protein because you're not having any protein intake and it's trying to kind of compensate for things.
Okay.
Right? So then it's using protein as kind of one of its fuel sources. But then all of a sudden, this interesting thing happens where carbohydrates and protein almost go to zero.
Okay.
So after 24 hours, all of a sudden, these ketones, these fat lipogenesis, ketosis. So ketosis kicks off.
Right.
And all of a sudden, your primary form of energy on this graph after 24 hours becomes ketones.
Right.
Okay. So you don't have to worry about losing protein, and you don't have to worry about losing almost all of your essential minerals and everything else. Your body literally goes, hey, I'm not getting any sustenance. I got to hold on to that.
Right.
Now, a lot of people look at, well, why does this happen? Like, we've been taught historically that if you stop eating, you're going to feel weak and you're not going to have energy. Well, let's think about this in an evolutionary time period. So if you're caveman Nick,
sure,
and you're out there, starving because you haven't been able to hunt that woolly mammoth,
right,
and your family hasn't been able to find foods or fruit or vegetables because it's middle of winter or something.
Okay,
what do you think is going to happen to you after you haven't eaten for a week?
Probably gonna lose weight, I would think.
Well, most people think you lay over and die, right? Oh, I don't have energy, I'm gonna die.
Right.
But that's not really the case. It's actually the opposite case. And so the body, the organism has a avid interest in making you more energetic and more capable so that you can kill that woolly mammoth.
Okay.
You think about it that way, right? The organism's not just going to lay over and die, right? Because then humans would die all the time. But it turns out that, no, instead it does the opposite. It gives you more energy.
Right.
And so there's been numerous research projects through history, if you go look at, unfortunately, situations like slaves and holocausts and everything else. But most of these people, when they're in extreme starve conditions, have plenty of energy. Energy is never a problem. The body finds a way to produce energy.
Right.
And this is how, through ketosis. So ketosis is giving them this power.
Right.
So the longer term fasting, you can hold it as long as you have something to consume.
Okay.
Right. Now, what we don't normally pay attention to is there's a lot of protein in our skin.
Okay.
Right. And there's a lot of excess protein buildup in our body that are maybe cells or things that haven't done the right thing, and the body has a cleanup program to consume that. And so initially what the body will do is you start getting to 2 or 3 days, any extra protein contents that it needs, it starts pulling from skin.
Okay.
Or it starts pulling from the internal organs,
Right.
As well as you're not just burning your external fat, but you're also there's fat inside around your organs.
Right.
And so it's pulling that energy from the internal organs, not just the external fat on your, underneath your skin.
Okay.
And so you can fast for as long as you have these resources.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is you go look at Holocaust victims, right? These guys are super, super skinny.
Right.
And let me ask you this. How many people in the Holocaust do you think had extra skin before they were put into concentration camps?
Probably a lot of them, I would think.
Well, they were considered the wealthier part of the society.
Right.
Right. That's one of the reasons the Germans hated them.
Yeah.
And they wanted to take their wealth. Right. So there's probably maybe 5 to 10% of the population that might have been a little bit overweight,
Sure.
but you never see pictures of the Holocaust where people have saggy extra skin after they lost all this weight.
Right.
They're always just super skin and bones.
Yeah.
Right. And so the other interesting thing about fasting is, let's say that you're overweight and you're trying to lose weight and you have extra skin. Guess what your body does? It starts pulling from your skin. You lose skin. Like, it shrinks your skin while you're fasting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
No
Isn't
idea.
it?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's this guy named, I think his name was Kyle. I should have written it down, but I didn't. But he was 27 years old, and the guy weighed 456 pounds.
Wow.
So he's a big dude,
Yeah.
right? Big dude. And he was working with a bunch of, hey, for anybody that's considering really long fasts, you should probably get a medical provider to track your stats, because you don't want to be in a situation where your electrolytes or some of your other, chemical important nutrients in your body are like tanking if you're not paying attention to things.
Right.
So he had medical advice when he did this. It wasn't just on his own.
Smart man.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so he went from 456 pounds down to 180 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Good job.
So less than he dropped to below 50% of his initial body weight.
Right.
Now, do you know how long he didn't eat for?
To lose that much weight, I'd think it'd be a substantial amount of time.
That's right. So he didn't eat for 382 days. Zero food.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So he was doing supplements for electrolytes and some basic, vitamins and stuff, and water, and that's it. That's all he took for over a year.
Any exercise?
There isn't a lot of. I didn't actually see a lot of that. I'm assuming he did basic, moderate exercise.
Sure.
Probably nothing crazy. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing like Joey or I would be doing.
Yeah,
but
some cardio work probably, most likely.
maybe just walking around, right?
Yeah.
Walking's good exercise.
Sure.
But predominantly the key factor here is that he didn't die.
Right.
He didn't have a carbohydrate or a glycogen crash. Like most people say, if you don't eat it regularly, your blood sugar is gonna kill you, right?
Right.
So the body was able to produce enough ketones in the body for him to be healthy.
Okay.
Now, the more fascinating thing is, let's go back to the ghrelin thing, right? So he said that for the first week he was hungry, and then he lost his appetite completely.
Right.
Just wasn't hungry at all.
Okay.
Thirsty, drank water, but was never hungry.
Right.
So when he got down to 180 pounds, apparently he just got hungry again. And once he got down to 180 and he started getting hungry again, he just started eating.
Oh, sure.
And as of this day, today, I looked it up on the internet, because the internet doesn't lie, right?
Oh, of course not.
He was still under 200 pounds today.
Wow.
And this happened, I think, like a decade ago.
Right.
This isn't a new thing. This is old research at this point.
Okay.
So I mean, you can stay on these fasts for as long as you want, as long as you're getting the vital nutrients and vitamins like electrolytes, and you have plenty of water, because humans need water to live.
Okay. And even not eating, you're not going to have to worry about maybe muscle atrophy or anything like that?
I'm sure you probably have to worry about some at some point. Your body does need protein, but he had a lot of skin. Again, back to the conversation of how much skin. You think about a guy that's like almost 500 pounds, right?
Yeah.
Probably got folds and folds of skin.
Right.
So his body was able to pull that protein from his skin. And you look at before and after pictures, he doesn't have huge rolls of skin that are just hanging there. So you get a guy that goes in and has like the surgery where they pull the fat out of you, right? What is that called?
Liposuction?
Liposuction, yeah. So if you have liposuction, you're going to have rolls of skin, and then you got to have this other surgery to get rid of all the extra skin.
Right.
But in this case, not the case, because your body actually consumes the protein out of your skin for nutrients.
Oh. So that's the trick.
It's almost like your body was built to do that.
Yeah, amazing.
Just thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the benefits of intermittent fasting. Okay. Number one, there's this thing called autophagy. A couple years ago, there was this Japanese doctor that got the Nobel Prize for figuring out something in science that had been alluded to for a long time, but we hadn't actually nailed down how it worked.
Okay.
And that's called something called autophagy.
Right.
It means eat thyself.
Okay.
And it's it's a cell's way of cleaning up all the junk that it builds up inside of the cell so that it can get rid of waste.
Okay.
And this waste is, just as an example, could be minor cancer cells. So I don't know how many people know this, but every single person on the planet has cancer.
Oh.
Everybody.
Okay.
And what happens is you get radiation from the sun, or you get radiation from an X-ray machine, or just normal day-to-day living. Cells programming inside of a cell that breaks down. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Right.
And so this cell then becomes cancerous. But the body is really good at identifying those cells, and it says, hey, get rid of that guy. And there's a couple different ways that it does that. But one of the ways that's a primary way for cleaning up this junk that it has in your body is something called autophagy. And so the cells themselves take care of this extra problem inside of themselves, and they don't necessarily turn cancerous because they can have this opportunity to clean up.
Right.
So they couldn't figure out how, the reason that this guy won the Nobel Prize is they couldn't figure out how it turned on. Okay. So they know that it does it. They were able to detect it in humans and detected it in yeast and detected it in rodents, but they could never really identify what turned it on. And so this doctor decided to starve the yeast that he was experimenting on, and it turns out that autophagy turned on after you starved the yeast of protein for a minimum of 12 hours.
Okay.
Now you think about that. So your human body, it doesn't clean up all this extra junk that's just lying around unless you don't eat for a minimum of 12 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of a detox.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because you go back to the 1940s, right? People would wake up and they'd eat breakfast and they'd go to work and they'd eat lunch and they'd go back to work and they'd get off and they'd all eat dinner. Dinner was like 6 o'clock religiously.
Right.
You go back. I remember even in the 80s, my grandparents dinner's at 6. You show up, food is set, everybody eats, but then there's no snacking for the rest of the night or the rest of the morning.
Right.
But if you think about that, eating at 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night is how many hours?
8 o'clock in the morning to 6 at night.
10 hours.
Yeah.
Right. So out of 24 hours, that means you didn't eat for 14 of them.
Yeah.
And where were the obesity levels back then?
Probably not as high.
Like almost non-existent compared to now.
Yeah.
Right. So we did intermittent fasting naturally as a society before we got this idea in our head that we had to eat constantly every single day.
Right.
Right. So I think the best bet is let's go back to that because people were a lot thinner.
Sure.
It seems like a better strategy to not worry about eating all the time, especially since the science says you don't have to eat all the time.
Right.
There's no evidence that eating constantly actually provides health benefits. And none of the research says that you have a higher metabolism if you're eating for 14 hours in the day.
Right. It's kind of a misconception that's kind of grown over the years. I mean, growing up, I lived in the family of 1,000 snacks. We were snacking all the time, all day, every day.
Yeah.
And so for someone like me who's trying to finally start getting healthier like this, it's been a lot more of a struggle trying to break that cycle that's kind of been thrown upon us.
Yeah, when I was a kid, it was pretty much don't eat a lot of snacks. And then I remember getting into college or high school, and kind of the mentality was changing in the late 90s, and everybody started eating pretty regularly.
Right.
And people had all these philosophies about what it meant to boost your metabolism and get healthy. I think the problem back then is there just wasn't a lot of research behind it.
Right.
And so people were just making assumptions, and assumption became, bro science.
Sure.
And people just decided that was the modern wisdom and everybody should follow it. And it didn't actually work for people, because you get into the early 2000s and you find out that everybody has these huge problems with large carbohydrate diets. And turns out, oh, we were wrong. It's not fat and it's not carbohydrate, or it's not fat and it's not eating all the time. It's actually eat more fat and less carbohydrates and eat less frequently.
Right.
And the science actually backs that up.
Yeah.
Which is nice, because now we actually have evidence to say, oh, look, this is how we should be doing it, because the science actually says we should do it.
Right. Now it's just a matter of actually following it.
That's right. So a couple of the other benefits that I really like, right, is me personally, I fast maybe 4 or 5 days a week. I skip breakfast and lunch. Like, I haven't eaten lunch yet. I don't know, what time is it?
Oh, I don't know. Probably about
noon?
1 o'clock or so.
Yeah, 1 o'clock? Yeah. So I haven't eaten breakfast today. Haven't eaten lunch today. Probably going to eat a late lunch and then a small dinner with the family.
Right.
Yesterday I ate breakfast and lunch, but I didn't eat dinner, which means I haven't eaten since yesterday at 1.
Wow.
So 24 hours of 12 hours.
Pretty
12
close.
Hours, 12 hours at this point. No. 24 hours.
Yeah.
24 hours.
First time. Yeah.
So that's crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a lot of time.
Just not even thinking about it, and I don't even care. Honestly, I've had 2 cups of coffee, so that the caffeine kind of gets
Sure.
going.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's interesting is reading some research and listening to a bunch of podcasts of these guys that are famous fighters that are on Joe Rogan talking about this.
Yeah.
And what they also find is that there's this thing called neuroplasticity.
Okay.
Right. So you think about why you get hangry all the time. Well, it's because your body's not used to using the different types of energy sources.
Right.
Right. So if you're fasting half of the time and you're not fasting the other half of the time, let's say you fast 4 days a week for breakfast, you just skip breakfast, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden your body's used to producing ketones. And so you have this better energy balance throughout your day, because whether you're eating or you're not eating, it's not dependent on the fact that you've had a high carbohydrate diet. The reason people are crashing all the time in terms of like low sugar response, right? Low blood or sugar levels in their blood,
right,
is because they're not used to processing ketones. Their body has no idea how to process ketones. And so when they're on this super heavy carbohydrate diet and they stop eating, guess what? Sugar crash.
Right. Yeah.
And their body can't compensate.
Mm-hmm.
Versus learning how to fast means that your body can compensate, and it compensates really well, especially when you're really comfortable with it.
Right.
Right. And so that prevents people from getting hangry, which is good.
I see.
Yeah. The other thing I've noticed personally, since I've been doing this for a long time, is I train now almost exclusively while fasted.
Really?
Yeah. So originally, when I first started doing it, the first couple of weeks, I was a little low energy when I was in the gym.
Yeah.
And then after that, my numbers went up. So I was benching more weight. I was playing soccer and ultimate frisbee at lunchtime, and I wasn't sitting there after 16 to 18 hours of not eating. I had tons of energy.
Right.
Constantly. Like I felt more energetic when I didn't eat versus when I actually did eat.
Wow.
And, people have this misconception of, hey, if you don't eat, you're not going to have energy.
Right.
But once your body gets used to ketones, man, you just have tons of energy all the time. Nowadays, I pretty much train exclusively when fasted. Like
right.
I don't even think about eating before I go to train. So at work, we have a nice cafeteria.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it closes at 1. So I typically go to the gym at noon, and either before I go to the gym or halfway through my workout when I'm taking a break between sets, I'll walk over to the cafeteria, I'll put my order in, they'll put it in the warmer, and then I'll go back, finish my workout, and then I'll eat afterwards.
Okay.
Now, the nice thing about that is there's some research that says your body does good nutrient uptake after a hard workout.
Okay.
And so it's a good opportunity to refeed your body.
Sure.
But it's not negative to go into a training session without actually having food.
Right. So long as you're used to fasting.
So long as you're
right.
So long as you're used to fasting, sure.
I've tried to do that before and it was killer.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you're not used to it, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. So you were asking earlier, how would somebody get into this?
Right.
Right. So I think I answered your question as you can do it as long as you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But the best way to get into it is to understand that when you feel hungry, it's one of two things. One, it's you're actually thirsty and your body's telling you need to drink more water, and most people don't drink enough water.
Right.
Or two, it's because your body's spiking a chemical called ghrelin.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's not you're gonna die. It's not you're gonna roll over and starve. It's literally just a hormone that you've trained your body to spike at that specific time. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but let's say that you're hungry for lunch, and then an hour goes by. Are you hungry anymore?
Not if I miss it, then not really as much.
That's right. And so what happens is the body spikes these ghrelin, and if you miss the window of ghrelin spikes, you're not hungry anymore. And so that's the other thing to think about. So if you're trying to do this, number one, realize that it's just a hormone, and then after it passes, you're not hungry.
Right.
And then I would recommend, just like my habits of successful people, start slow.
Right.
Skip one day a week. Maybe just breakfast once a week. Maybe every Monday you skip breakfast.
Right.
And maybe week 3, week 4, you start skipping 2 or 3 breakfasts a day.
Okay.
Right. Or breakfast a week.
Yeah.
Right. And then just work into it slowly over time. I wouldn't jump into it just like any diet, you start jumping into things. It's not habit. And it literally just, you get over it in a week.
Right.
Right. The other thing I'd also recommend is not changing the rest of your diet when you're doing this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So people typically tend to overeat in the evenings because they were hungry for the entire morning.
Right.
Just try to eat normally. That way you're getting into a habit of eating normally, no matter whether you eat breakfast or not.
Okay.
Now, obviously, this is for the normal person trying to lose a little weight and trying to stay in a healthy weight category.
Sure.
This is not something I'd recommend for a sports athlete that's trying to put on muscle or be super highly energetic, right?
Right.
Obviously, they can fast. They just need to make sure that their caloric intake matches what their body actually needs.
Right.
And there's all these tools online where you put in your weight, your height, your percentage body fat, and it'll tell you how many calories you should be eating. So you should definitely eat within your caloric balance.
Right.
A little bit negative if you're trying to lose weight, a little bit positive if you're trying to gain weight, but really somewhere around that balance.
Right.
And the other thing I recommend is don't change your diet. Like keep eating the same stuff you're normally eating.
Okay.
Back to my habits podcast that I did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's good to make small changes, healthier choices in your diet, but don't make massive ones because then you're just not going to keep up with it.
Right.
Yeah. So there's that. The other thing is that I kind of want to bring up. It's kind of important is that the intermittent fasting does not seem to yield better results than any other diet. So all the studies kind of have the same results.
Right.
Now, there are some benefits in terms of people tend to stay on an intermittent fast much longer.
Okay.
And the reason for that, by the way, and Dr. Jason Fung brings this up, is that what do you do when you don't have to eat for an hour?
Something else.
That's right.
Yeah.
You get an hour in your day back.
Yeah.
Whether you're, you have a job and you're checking your email, or whether you're in the afternoon and you have that extra hour now, instead of making dinner, you can go to the gym, right, or you can go on a walk, or you can spend time, heaven forbid, you just pull out a bag of Doritos and sit and watch TV for that extra hour. Right. Hopefully not, because you're fasting.
Right.
but watch a little bit extra Netflix maybe.
Yeah, there you go.
But, again, the main idea is it gives you more time in your day.
Right. And
so one of the things that I found, and a lot of other people, proponents of intermittent fasting is you get extra time in your day. Mm-hmm. And usually it's more than an hour to do dinner, right? Or breakfast.
Yeah.
Because you got to make breakfast, then you got to clean up breakfast, and you got to worry about dishes later. So it adds time.
Right.
And so it gives you time back in your day. If you're not changing your diet, then you're still eating all the things that you like, mm-hmm, and you're just missing a meal a couple times a week. And so a lot of people find that it's much easier to maintain that type of a diet than trying something like jumping over to the ketogenic diet or the South Beach diet or any of these other crazy dieting extremes.
Yeah, getting on any of those, it's always 0 to 100.
Yeah, exactly, right? Okay, so any other major questions you think? That sounds like we covered it pretty good.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so just kind of as a recap for people that want us to go through the top. It's look, anybody can do intermittent fasting, and fasting is you do it every day. So don't be scared to try it again, right? Don't be scared to extend your fast.
Right.
So instead of just sleeping for 8 hours or 10 hours and fasting in the morning, you can now fast for 16 hours just by skipping breakfast, or you can skip breakfast and lunch. And if you really want to work into a longer fast, then just start slow, right? Just skip breakfast on some days, skip breakfast and lunch on other days. And then a lot of people do what they call alternate day fasting, where some days they just won't eat at all. Okay. So you can build into it. I have found that longer fasts are good for me. So when I'm cutting, when I want to get really lean, like remember a couple years ago when I was like sub 10% body fat, I was like super, super lean.
Oh yeah.
So I fasted for 12 days. I didn't eat for 12 days. And I wasn't even hungry at the end of it. Like I said, I could have probably gone for a couple more days, but I just decided that I was at a weight where I was comfortable and I could start eating again.
Sure.
The other thing is when I got back into trying to get back into shape because of my back last year, I did like a 5-day fast.
Yeah.
Just over Thanksgiving, right? It wasn't, or no, Christmas. It was December. So
Sure.
But it wasn't anything special. It was just, I'm so used to skipping breakfast and lunch that I had a ghrelin spike for dinner, and then I had a ghrelin spike for dinner the next day, and then I wasn't hungry for the other 3 days.
Right.
And then I just started eating again because I wasn't really interested in losing a ton of weight. I was just kind of interested in resetting, my gut bacteria and everything else by not eating over a couple of days.
Sure.
Oh, I guess that'd be one other good thing to note is people find that fasting for longer than 3 days is a good opportunity for them to reset their gut flora and everything else. So it just might be another thing to consider if you're having some gut problems, gastrointestinal problems, is, fasting for a couple of days could help with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to tell my dad about that.
Yeah,
I'd appreciate that.
The science is interesting.
Right.
I'll have to do another podcast on it, but there's a company, and I'm not sponsored by any of these people, by the way. There's a company called Viome, and you can pay them, I think, like $200 or something, and they'll actually sample your gut bacteria and tell you everything that you have in your gut.
Wow. Okay.
And they can make health or dietary recommendations based on the positives or negatives of what they see.
Wow.
Yeah,
awesome.
so that's something completely not related to intermittent fasting. I'll have to do another podcast on that later, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
So and just to wrap up, so extend your fast, that's fine, but long-term fasts aren't bad either. So if you want to be that guy that goes for a month without eating because you're overweight by 40 pounds and you think it's a good deal, go talk to a healthcare provider. Right. Plan on doing it. I would recommend reading Jason Fung's book about the diabetes code and the obesity code because it has a lot of good examples of actual case studies of people that have done this.
Right.
And if you're following the good advice of doctors and you're making sure that you're doing it in a healthy way, I don't see any reason at all why people shouldn't be able to fast for as long as they feel comfortable getting down to a weight that they want.
Sure. Yeah, it's just a matter of being able to walk before you can run.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, I do it. And again, I do it with the concern of I still keep within the caloric levels that I want. Right. I just, don't eat breakfast because I don't like to eat breakfast every day, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. Anyways. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Nick, wave to the audience for those that are actually watching us on YouTube and seeing the video. Yeah. And will you be back?
Sure. If you want me back, I will absolutely be back.
Excellent. So again, this is James McDuffie, Perspectives, March 1st, 2020, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one.